Welcome back to my 100% playthrough of Dragon Age Origins. Today we will be doing something slightly different and we will be going over the Mage skills today. Now the Mage skills, this may take a little while. And you'll see here I've actually created 4 identical characters. And I have put them all using the Golems of Amgarak campaign. And the reason for that is simply that that campaign, when you create a new character, will set that character to level 20, so I was able to give these mages whatever skills I wanted, which in this case is all of them. So let's just get straight into it. Now there will be more skills to go over in this game than when we had the warrior or the rogue guides. Now Sidoni here, this particular one at least, I have made her a spirit healer with all of those skills. We'll do the specializations last, but I've given her all the primal spells. So mage spells are divided into 4 categories, ignoring these generic ones up the top. You've got primal, you've got creation, you've got spirit, and you've got entropy. They all have really useful spells. Primal might be just the most spammable spells, the ones that you can cast over and over, because most of them just deal direct damage to the enemy. These other ones have a bit more situational uses, but like I say, still really good spells in those groups too. But we'll start with primal. Now, as you can see, there are 4 skill trees here. You've got a fire, earth, ice, and lightning. We will start with the fire, but there is quite a bit of overlap, especially between fire and ice. But we will see how that goes. So, fire, the first skill is Flame Blast. Caster's hands are up with a cone of flame, inflicting fire damage on all targets in the area for a short time. Friendly fire possible. So let's go find some enemies. Oh, speak of the devil. And we will use Flame Blast on them. So here we are. Flame Blast, there we go. Just deals fire damage. Fire does have a cool effect where it does do damage over time for a little bit though. So you can see there they are taking burning damage because I used that on them. Okay, next we have Flaming Weapons. This is a sustain skill. And what it says here, while the spell is active, the caster enchants the party's melee weapons with flame, so they deal additional fire damage with each successful attack. So this is just a buff to your party members. We use that, Flaming Weapons, and then we'll look at my ally, which is, can't actually remember this guy's name, Jarek. His weapons now, you can see the red glow around them, they are doing fire damage as well as their normal effects. Okay, don't do whatever you're doing there, alright. Next we have Fireball. This is just a really good spell. You've probably seen mages use it before, and it does do friendly fire, so be careful. But there we go, it's just an area of effect damaging spell, knocks everyone down and inflicts fire damage, as well as burning them with the damage over time effect. And your very last one here is Inferno. The caster summons a huge column of swirling flame. All targets in the area take constant fire damage as they burn. Friendly fire possible. So another area of effect, this one has a wind-up period, so we'll do that, hopefully he doesn't knock me out of it. There we go, there's Inferno. Anyone caught in that firestorm will take a lot of damage, including your allies, so do be careful when you're using that one. Yeah, just be aware of it. But that is all the fire spells. Really good. Usually I would get my characters to specialize in either fire or ice. Of the two, I actually do think fire is better. That is because there are a lot of enemies that either resist or seem to be completely immune to cold damage. In particular, undead are immune, I think revenants as well, maybe arcane horrors. Those sort of enemies don't take any damage from ice, so I do tend to prefer fire. Although I think there are some enemies that resist fire as well. So whichever one you choose, you won't be hitting absolutely everything with it. But I think fire does hit more things. Okay, I might actually skip Earth for now and we'll go straight onto Ice because it does a lot of similar things. So the first one here, Winter's Grasp. The caster envelops the target in frost, freezing lower level targets solid. Those that resist suffer a penalty to movement speed. Really good spell. We'll see if we can use it. I'll take a potion actually so this character doesn't die. Thank you. Okay, here's a Genlock Alpha. We will use Winter's Grasp. There we go, he's too high level to be affected by the freezing effect, but he is moving slower because of it, and it did some good damage as well. Okay, next will be one that is probably familiar. Yep, we have Frost Weapons. This is exactly like Flaming Weapons, except it makes my allies inflict frost damage instead. Another sustain spell. But if we look at Jarek here now, his blades are glowing white because he is dealing frost damage. So just another way to help out your party members. But as you might expect, you can only have one of flaming weapons or frost weapons active at a time. Next is Cone of Cold. Now I know this is a spell I used a lot during my main playthrough, so you probably know what it does, but I've just run out of enemies, so I'm just going to reload this game, and we'll go find some more enemies to fight, and then I'll show you Cone of Cold. While we're finding enemies, I will just point out I'm not going to show you the spell combinations here. I might mention them if they're relevant to the skill tree we're looking at, but we saw them in my main playthrough. I did all 10 of them, so I'm not going to show them all to you here. Anyway, Cone of Cold. So do that, freezes them solid. Now the reason I mentioned spell combinations is there is of course a good one with Cone of Cold, and that is you can use Stone Fist or get a critical hit, or use Crushing Prison, which is another spell, to shatter the target, instantly killing them. Really good combination with Cone of Cold. But anyway, Blizzard. So Blizzard is the ice version of Inferno, so you can probably guess what it does, but let's use it anyway. Oh, there's the shattering effect. We actually got it. There we go. It just summons an ice storm, knocks everyone over, deals cold damage. Also, penalty to movement speed, I believe. While it's active, let's have a read. An ice storm deals continuous cold damage to everyone in the targeted area and slows their movement speed while granting bonuses to defense and fire resistance. Targets can fall or be frozen solid unless they pass a physical resistance check. Friendly fire is possible. Perfect. Okay, now you might be wondering about these other two skill trees. So Lightning. Lightning has a lot of similarities to the Frost and Fire skill trees, but it does have some differences. So let's just make sure I have all of them on my quick bar. Okay, so their basic skill is this one here called just Lightning, I think it's called. Yep. The caster fires a bolt of lightning at the target, dealing electricity damage. Friendly fire is possible. Okay, so let us use this on someone. This guy here will do. So it is quite similar to, say, Winter's Grasp. It just deals damage to the target. Where Lightning gets a little interesting though, you might notice it does not have this weapon buff skill. Instead it's got Shock, which is actually the same as Cone of Cold, except it's lightning damage. Or Flame Burst, there we go, killed them. Awesome. So if we read it, the caster's hands are up with a Cone of Lightning, damaging all targets in the area, friendly fire possible. Except it's basically the same as Cone of Cold or Flame Blast. It just doesn't have their added effects though. It does deal a good amount of damage from what I can tell. Now, interestingly, Tempest is next. So while Blizzard and Inferno were the 4th tier skills, Tempest is only 3rd tier, which is I find really interesting. But let us summon a Thunderstorm, please. Okay, you don't want to. Whatever, be like that. Again, you need to wind up for this one. And there we go, we've got the Lightning Storm there. Looks quite cool. Let's read if it has any special effects. The caster unleashes a fierce lightning storm that deals constant electricity damage to anyone in the targeted area. Friendly fire possible. Yep, so just area of effect spell that lingers for quite a while. But since that's the case, you might be wondering what is 4th, because so far we've seen versions of these in both fire and ice. But there isn't a weapon enhancement, so what else does Lightning have? And the answer is Chain Lightning. Now you've probably seen enemies use this one. It's actually a really powerful spell. Let's see if there's a couple of enemies remaining, I'll use it, otherwise I'll reload. Okay, now we have a bunch of enemies, so let us try and use Chain Lightning. Again, it does need to be charged up, and I just got interrupted, which is really annoying, so let's give it another go. There we go, and it deals a ton of damage to all the enemies. So it hits the target, the person you targeted, and then it jumps to everyone else, which you saw there with the damage numbers jumping up. So Chain Lightning is actually a really cool spell. I really like it a lot, and Fire and Ice don't have an equivalent. Yeah, so these lightning ones don't really seem to have much secondary effects, but I do think they deal more base damage than the fire or ice spells do, as these two do have quite useful secondary effects. Okay, now I've saved Earth for last, and that is for a very good reason. They are completely different to the other spells in the tree. So first we've got Rock Armor. This is a sustain skill. The caster's skin becomes as hard as stone, granting a bonus to armor for as long as this mode is active. So yeah, so it basically just increases your defense. So you can use Rock Armor. And you can see my character model there, it's got kind of this texture going on now. And yeah, so now her armor has increased. That's all rock armor does. Stone Fist. The caster hurls a stone projectile that knocks down the target and inflicts nature damage, possibly shattering those that have been petrified or frozen solid. Friendly fire is possible. Yep, exactly what it says, so use it there. It knocks them down, and if he's frozen it will also inflict the shattering effect, which is really cool. Okay, Earthquake. This is kind of the area of effect spell for this particular tree. Let's use it on him. Oh, well, okay, I died. That's fine. Yeah, there was no charge up time for it. You just inflict an earthquake. I might do it again because that probably wasn't the best demonstration of it. There we go. So it's just making everything shake. Chance to knock the enemies down. Let's see what it actually says. The caster disrupts the earth, causing a violent earthquake that knocks everyone in the targeted area to the ground unless they pass a physical resistance check every few seconds. Friendly fire possible. Yeah, so unlike something like, say, Fireball, which just has the one physical resistance check, this will make them take a resistance check every few seconds. So even if they resist the first one, they might get hit by the second one. But essentially it just knocks everyone over. As you saw there, it didn't even really do any damage, but it is good for some field control, for sure. And then lastly we have Petrify. The caster draws from knowledge of the elements to turn the target into stone, unless it passes a physical resistance check. While petrified, the target is immobile and vulnerable to shattering from critical hits. Creatures already made of stone are immune. Interesting one there. Its main effect is if you want to shatter them, but we'll cast it on the Hurlock. I think... Okay. Now my own Earthquake is being a problem, so let's actually reload that. Yeah, I never actually really use Earthquake, if I'm honest. I find it just more annoying than anything else. Alright, let's try petrifying him. There we go. He's turned to stone, and he was just shattered by the Bronto. Awesome. Okay. Those are all the primal spells. As you can see, really interesting mix. Usually not a category of spells you'd want to get everything in, because there's a lot of redundancy there. A lot of them do the same things, just using different elements. On the other hand, if you do take everything, then nothing will be immune to all of your spells. Because the problem with specializing in, say, ice magic is you will run into creatures that are immune to it, and you're going to have to rely on other things, or your companions, to deal damage. Whereas if you have everything, I guess that's not an issue. Okay, but let's move on to the next type of spell. So I am going to switch characters. We will go to this Sedona. Okay, here I am with another version of Sedona. This one has specialized into the creation spells. Now, creation, really good spell tree. Having said that, I find there are only a couple that I often use. A couple of spells on it, I mean, that I often use. Alright, let's see what we've got. So first we've got this healing tree. So we've got the basic spell Heal. I recommend all mages get this. It does exactly what it says. The caster causes flesh to knit miraculously, instantly healing an ally by a moderate amount. You should know what this does. You've seen me use it in the main playthrough plenty of times, I'm sure. But if we just get into a fight, I've taken a little bit of damage. I'm not going to wait around to take tons of damage. But I can just heal either myself or an ally. And there we go. My health is restored. Pretty simple, but certainly useful. However, you may not have looked at what the rest of the skills in this tree do. So the next one is Rejuvenate. The caster channels regenerative energy to the selected ally, granting them a short-term boost to mana or stamina regeneration. Now, we can see Jerick here has actually used quite a lot of stamina, so this will make him regenerate it faster, essentially. Not really something I bother using a lot, but you can see even there, it's actually regenerating relatively quickly. So it is a really handy spell. Probably more so for your warriors and rogues, because mages are more likely to just spam mana potions than anything else. Do I have any? There's Lorien potions here, yeah. But still really good for your fighters. So next we've got Regeneration. The caster infuses an ally with beneficial energy, greatly accelerating health regeneration for a short time. Basically does the same as Rejuvenate, except it rejuvenates health instead of stamina or mana. Do that, and then he should be gaining health quicker than he would be. You can see there it's actually going up quite fast, given that we're in combat. Because remember, health regeneration in combat is usually very slow. So that can be useful. It means you won't have to be spamming your heal spell quite so often, but you do need to be applying it, because I'm actually not sure how long it lasts for. But anyway, then we've got Mass Rejuvenation. So this basically does the same thing as Rejuvenate, which boosts the stamina or mana regeneration, but it does it for all your allies. So the caster channels a stream of rejuvenating energy to all members of the party, significantly increasing mana and stamina regeneration for a short duration. Yeah, so that's just a party-wide rejuvenate essentially. Certainly can be useful, but again, I do think it's more useful for warriors and rogues than it is for mages. Okay, so that's the top line. Now, this next line is, I believe Wind starts with some of these spells in the main campaign. I don't usually use them, although I think her tactics by default makes her use them sometimes. But let's have a look at them. So, Heroic Offense. The caster enhances an ally's aptitude in battle, granting a bonus to attack. That's just a good spell to have. I mean, honestly, just put it on your top damage dealers or your rogues or whoever you want. If they are some type of fighter, it's obviously pretty useless for a mage. For anyone else, certainly a good buff to have. But that's the thing, it's a buff. I would prefer to be healing or dealing damage with my mages, but that's just my personal playstyle. If you prefer to be more buffing, you can certainly do that with Heroic Offense, and it is a good buff to have, to be clear. Heroic Aura. So this is a activated skill. The caster sheathes an ally in an aura that completely shrugs off most missile attacks for a moderate duration. If you're having problems with archers, you can certainly use this and make one of your companions immune to ranged attacks, essentially. I don't normally bother. I would rather just say throw a fireball at the archers and knock them over if they're causing an issue, but it's an option, I guess. Heroic Defense. The caster shields an ally with magic, granting bonuses to defense, cold resistance, electricity resistance, fire resistance, nature resistance, and spirit resistance, although at a penalty to fatigue, meaning that the ally's talents or spells will cost more to activate. Certainly interesting. It is a good defensive skill, and that penalty to fatigue is basically the same as putting on a higher class of armor than they normally wear, because armor is usually how you get a fatigue penalty. But it makes them good at tanking hits from basically anything, because it's not only defense, it's also your magical defenses: cold, electricity, fire, nature, and spirit. Yeah, so it's a good defensive one. And then you've got haste. Now this is a sustained skill, unlike the rest which are activated, so you activate this and then it will just be active. While this mode is active, the caster imbues the party with speed, allowing them to move and attack significantly faster, although the spell also poses a small penalty to attack and drains mana rapidly while in combat. And it's that second part you've really got to watch out for. This is actually a really powerful spell. I don't really use the rest of these, but I'm tempted just to get haste. But the downside is the penalty to attack is not really much at all. Your increased attack speed more than makes up for that. But it does drain your mana, so you do have to keep an eye on your mage's mana if they've got haste active, for sure. But still, a really powerful spell. And actually, I'm not going to really show you the buffs, but we'll activate haste and just see how it works. There we go. You saw there, Jarek just got faster. His weapon attacks will be happening faster as well. We don't really have a baseline to compare it to. And to be fair, it doesn't really seem like it's draining mana that much, so maybe that's not such a big deal. Okay, well that's interesting. But there is haste. It is certainly a good spell to have. Now the glyphs. You have seen me use a couple of these in the main playthrough. I really like Glyph of Paralysis, and I don't know why it's the first one in the skill tree, because it probably, in my opinion, is the best one in the skill tree. But let's use them. I might reload the battle though, so just give me a minute. Okay, I've found a battle, so let's look at these glyphs. Glyph of Paralysis. The caster inscribes a glyph on the ground that paralyzes the first enemy who crosses its bounds, unless the opponent passes a physical resistance check. A single caster can maintain a limited number of glyph paralysis at once. Okay, now the way it is worded there, it sounds like it's intended to be used. You put it on the ground and just hope someone runs into it. That's definitely not the best way to use it. The best way is to deliberately target someone and then use it. And there you go, he is now paralyzed, which essentially takes him out of the fight. So either you can focus on him to kill him while he's immobile, or you can deal with other people while he's stuck in place doing nothing. Really powerful spell. Then you've got the Glyph of Warding. The caster inscribes a glyph on the ground that bestows nearby allies with bonuses to defense and mental resistance, as well as a bonus against missile attacks. I mean, this could be useful. What you can do is, like, if you've got your warriors and rogues up there fighting, you can place this around them and it will basically give them higher defenses while they're doing that. Not really something I bother with much though, but again it falls into the same buffing category as these, although I do think it's a little bit better just because it's area of effect instead of a single target like these buffs, although the area of effect is relatively small. Next, Glyph of Repulsion. Now this is an interesting one. The caster inscribes a glyph on the ground that knocks back enemies unless they pass a physical resistance check. Yeah, so it's basically a knockdown, however it does have an interesting effect. I just got paralyzed, so I can't show you. That's okay, paralysis over. So essentially just knocks people down. But, spell combination, if you mix it with the Glyph of Paralysis, they essentially do opposite things, so you might wonder what happens. Holds them in place, forces them away. If you use them together, you get a spell combination. Paralysis Explosion, which is basically an AoE paralysis spell. Paralyzes all enemies and allies too. You can see that my Bronto's paralyzed in the area of effect. So quite cool if you use them together. By itself though, I don't usually bother with Glyph of Repulsion. The only reason I'll use it is for the spell combination. Glyph of Neutralization. The caster inscribes a glyph on the ground that neutralizes all magic, dispels its effects, drains all mana, and prevents spellcasting or mana regeneration within its bounds. Awesome spell that I honestly just forget to use most of the time. It essentially makes enemy mages useless. I do have a mage here somewhere. This one. Genlock Emissary. There we go. And that should have drained all his mana as well as removing all the magical effects. Really good spell. It's not particularly flashy, but it certainly does the job. And so there are the glyphs. Like I say, I do think Glyph of Paralysis is just the best one. Although the Glyph of Repulsion, it can kind of act as an upgrade to it with that spell combination. This last skill tree here, a little bit of an odd one. So we start with Spell Wisp. This is just a really good sustain spell for any mage, really. The caster summons a wisp that grants a small bonus to spell power for as long as the mode is active. So we can do that. Spell Wisp, and then we've just got the wee wisp, and you can see the wisp around me, and it means my spell power's a little bit more than it would be otherwise. Spell power is kind of what mages use to determine the effectiveness of their spells, so it just makes all your spells a little bit better while that's active. Grease, not really one I bother with, mostly because of friendly fire than any other reason. Let's put it on my toolbar down the bottom. Grease does what it says. It basically just creates a big pool of grease. You can set it on fire as part of another spell combination, but its main effect is just to knock over anyone who fails the physical resistance check. Again, can affect allies, which is why I don't really use it. The caster summons a grease slick that slows anyone who walks on it, as well as causing them to slip unless they pass a physical resistance check. If the grease is set on fire, it burns intensely for a time. Alright, Spell Bloom. The caster creates an energizing bloom of magic that grants anyone nearby, friend or foe, a bonus to mana regeneration. Interesting, can certainly be used to help enemy spellcasters as well as yourself. Look, my own grease just knocked me over there. But it does actually help you as well, so I don't usually bother. It just gives mana regeneration, so it only helps mages, and mages have lyrium potions, so I don't really think you need it. Stinging Swarm. Now this one is interesting just because it is the only damaging spell in this entire tree. It has options for paralysis and options to knock over, but nothing that actually deals damage except for Stinging Swarm. A swarm of biting insects descend on the target, dealing a large amount of damage over a short time. If the targeted creature dies before the swarm dissipates, the insects will jump to another nearby enemy. So let's try a Stinging Swarm on this guy here. If I can get it to work, please. Oh, I may not have the mana for it, actually. I don't. Alright, let's take a lyrium potion. Okay, now let's try do that. There you go, he's taking damage. Like it says, damage over time. The good thing about this is there's no real such thing as overkill, because if he does die, they will jump to another nearby enemy and attack them instead. But that is the creation spell. So as you can see there, it's basically the healing and buffing skills, as well as some other effects, like it's got the paralysis there, as well as the knockover effects. But mostly healing and buffing is kind of what Creation School does. Alright, let's jump to another character, and we'll have a look at another skill set. Okay, here we are with Sedona version 4. This particular Sedona is specialized in the Spirit School of Magic. So the Spirit School essentially excels in dealing spirit damage to enemies, and also dealing with enemy mages. If you're not a Templar, the Spirit skill is probably the best for dealing with enemy mages. So let's have a look. We do have a mage here. Let's see what these spells are. So this first tree, Spell Shield. While this ability is active, any hostile spell targeted at the caster has a 75% of chance of being absorbed into the Fade, draining mana instead. Once all mana has been depleted, the shield collapses. Yep, so this one here can only be used on yourself, I'm pretty sure. Let's try it. Spell Shield. But it does mean that if that mage tries to target me with a spell, 75% chance that it will damage my mana instead of my health. Really good defensive spell against enemy mages if they're being a problem. Situationally good, most battles probably don't need it, but it can come in handy for sure. Dispel Magic. The caster removes all dispellable effects from the target, friendly fire possible. This is very similar to the Templar spell, I think it's Cleanse, but this only affects a single person, so you've got to... There you go, I dispelled my own spell shield. That's what it meant by friendly fire possible. You can get rid of your own buffs. Can be okay, I suppose, but I don't really find that enemy casters put many effects that you are able to dispel on you. Maybe I'm wrong though, because I'm not entirely sure what effects can be dispelled and what can't be. For example, I complain a lot in my main campaign about Curse of Mortality. I've got no idea if you can dispel that with Dispel Magic. Would be cool if you could though. Anti-Magic Ward. The caster wards an ally against all spells and spell effects, beneficial or hostile, for a short time. Really good spell when you're dealing with enemy mages. It's this one here. You've probably seen it on enemies throughout the game. There are a couple of enemies that use this. Really annoying when you're a mage because you've got no way to get rid of it, but essentially protects them from all magic. But you can cast it yourself, or on one of your allies, if you are fighting enemy mages. Again, useful against mages, useless anywhere else, but mages are certainly one of the biggest threats in the game, so I'd call that a good spell to have. Finally, Anti-Magic Burst. This burst of energy eliminates all dispellable magical effects in the area, friendly fire possible. Okay, so this is more like the Templar's Cleanse, unlike Dispel Magic which targets one person, but it does the same thing, it just affects everyone in the area. So we can do that, Anti-Magic Burst, there we go. If these guys had any effects on them, they'd now be dispelled. Magical effects, I should say. Okay, that is the first row, which as you can see, like I was saying, this is a good tree to take if mages are a problem for you, in particular Anti-Magic Ward, really powerful against enemy mages. Okay, this next tree, Mana Drain. The creator creates a parasitic bond with a spellcasting target, absorbing a small amount of mana from it. Exactly what it sounds like. You can see there I've used a little bit of mana, so let's see if we can drain some of his mana. Mana Drain, there we go. I took some of his mana, made it my own. Pretty basic spell. Not one I use a lot, just because enemy spellcasters tend to have so much mana that the small amount you drain doesn't really matter that much. I'd much rather just attack them and get them out of the way. Mana Cleanse. The caster sacrifices personal mana to nullify the mana of enemies in the area. So we can do that as well. So I use my mana. And in theory, he can't use his mana anymore, I think is what's meant to happen there. You can't really tell, because there's no visual effect that it's happened. But I think that's what Mana Cleanse does. Spell Might, well in this mode, so this is a mode, it is a sustained mode. The caster overflows with magical energy, making spells more powerful, but expending mana rapidly and suffering a penalty to mana regeneration. Really good spell, just makes your spells better. Penalty to mana regen, again, not the end of the world, because you do have Lyrium potions, so just stock up on potions if you plan on using this. But it does make all your spells more powerful. Mana Clash. The caster expels a large amount of mana in direct opposition to enemy spellcasters, who are completely drained of mana and suffer spirit damage proportional to the amount lost. Really good at the start of a fight against a mage. You can basically make him use up all his mana and deal a ton of spirit damage to him. There we go, 619. Killed him in one shot. It's actually a really good spell if I'm honest. Only good against enemy mages, of course. But against them, it is honestly one of the best spells in the game. As you saw there, I just took out that spellcaster in one hit, basically. And even if they survive, they don't have any mana anymore, so they're not casting spells. At least until they regenerate some of their mana. Alright, Walking Bomb. I'm actually going to reload now, though. Okay, Walking Bomb. I did use this during my main playthrough, and I kept commenting I'd never used it before. I actually really like it, having used it a little bit. Let's read it first, and then we'll use it in battle. The caster magically injects a target with corrosive poison that inflicts continual nature damage. If the target dies while the effect is still active, it explodes, damaging all targets nearby. Although this spell is related to Virulent Walking Bomb, the magic behind the two does not interact. A target cannot be infected with both. Friendly fire possible. Okay, so let's try using Walking Bomb. We did see this. It essentially just does magic over time on, damage over time on someone, and then when they die, so you can see that he's taking a little bit of damage, but when they die, if the Walking Bomb effect is still active, he will explode, damaging everyone around him. Because he was at full health when I cast the spell, it might wear out before he explodes, but we'll see, I guess. Okay, so the effect will off, but this is where I can show you the upgraded version. I'll skip over Death Siphon for now. Let's do Virulent Walking Bomb. The caster magically injects a target with corrosive poison that inflicts continual nature damage. If the target dies while the effect is still active, it explodes, damaging nearby targets and possibly infecting them in turn. That infecting them in turn is of course where Virulent Walking Bomb is a straight upgrade to just Walking Bomb. It can infect more than just the target itself. Although the spell is related, they don't interact. Yep, we know that. Okay, so let's use Virulent Walking Bomb on this guy. Okay, I'm going to run away because friendly fire is possible, so when he explodes he'll kill me. Probably if he's too close. But there he is. There was no one around him, but that would have hurt all enemies or my allies who were nearby. Okay, let's go to that one we skipped over. Death Siphon is a sustained skill, so this is one you keep active at all times. While this mode is active, the caster draws a nearby entropic energy, draining residual power from any dead enemy nearby to restore the caster's mana. It's actually a really good spell. It's one I probably don't use enough. Okay, so Death Siphon. While this mode is active, the caster draws a nearby entropic energy, draining the residual power from any dead enemy nearby to restore the caster's mana. So this is good later on into a fight. Once you've already killed some of the enemies, you can essentially passively, because this is a sustained skill, so it's one you activate and then it's always active. So let's activate it now. Yeah, so once you've started killing some of the enemies, you can actually use them to restore your mana. It will happen passively, like you won't have to do anything for it, just keep Death Siphon active. But you'll see that your mana will regenerate a lot faster once you've killed a few people. Okay, and then this last one, Animate Dead. I'll be honest, I don't like it. It is a kind of summoning spell, but the conditions are so specific that I don't find it that useful. And honestly, the dead creature you get isn't really that powerful either, in my opinion. But anyway, the caster summons a skeleton minion from the corpse of a fallen enemy to fight alongside the party for a short time. Although, as a puppet of the caster, it will not use any talents or spells without specific instruction. Okay, let's see if I can kill some of these Hurlocks and use it on them. Okay, there's a dead Hurlock. Let's see if it'll work on him. I honestly don't know. Yep, it does. So then he comes back to fight. And now I've got this basically zombie guy running around helping me out. But as you can see, he's already taken a bit of damage. I don't think he's really that strong. Is kind of my big problem with him, but the other problem is you do need corpses around to reanimate, and that can just be annoying, unlike say the ranger. We looked at the ranger with the rogue talents. Unlike the ranger who can just summon his allies at any time, we need to wait until his corpse is around to get ours. Okay, what is this last tree? Now this last tree is really good, but it's really just for the first and last talents. These middle two, I'm not a big fan of. But let's have a look. So Mind Blast. Mind Blast is really good for any mage to take. The caster projects a wave of telekinetic force that stuns enemies caught in the sphere. Why it's really good, it basically originates from your mage. So the reason I really like it is that if the enemies break through your frontline fighters and start targeting your mage, then you can Mind Blast them to stun as a kind of AoE control spell. So there we go, they're stunned, and now I can run away or cast spells or do whatever else I need to do. It's just a really good quick stun. And AoE stun too, which is always really useful. Force Field. The caster erects a telekinetic barrier around a target, who becomes completely immune to damage for the duration of the spell, but cannot move. It's that but cannot move thing is why I don't usually bother using this. So there's Force Field, so he can't be targeted, but he also can't do anything. So, I mean, I guess it could be useful to kind of protect one of your characters who's about to die, but your heal is still on cooldown or something. So you can kind of protect him and then heal once your heal spell is active. It's kind of the only situation I see that being at all useful for. But I think it is worth it to get these other spells. Telekinetic weapons. Now I said this is useless, that's a little too harsh. It does have a good use, I just always forget to use it. So that's probably my problem, as opposed to the spell not being very good. While this mode is active, the caster enchants the party's melee weapons with telekinetic energy that increases armor penetration. The bonus to armor penetration is based on the caster's spell power and provides greater damage against heavily armored foes. It is certainly a good sustained skill. It's a little bit like flaming weapons or frost weapons, I guess, but instead of adding elemental damage to your party's weapons, it gives them armor penetration, which is really good against heavily armored fighters. A little bit situational, I don't really use it that much, but it certainly can be useful. What I do really like though is Crushing Prison. The caster encloses a target in a collapsing cage of telekinetic force, inflicting spirit damage for the duration and possibly shattering those that have been petrified or frozen solid. Yeah, so I really like this spell. Crushing Prison is probably one of my favourite spells in the game. It essentially immobilises them and deals constant spirit damage to them over time. Also got the bonus effect of shattering, but if I want to shatter, I would prefer to use Stone Fist, just because I like the normal effect of Crushing Prison so much, but still, it is an instant KO if you manage to inflict a shatter with it as well. Alright, those are the spirit skills, so a bit of a mixed bag there. You've got the anti-mage skill trees, and then you've got this one here which kind of deals with death and nature damage, and then you've got this one here which also does some nature damage but has some interesting effects too. So I really do like the skill tree. There are some really good spells in it. It's honestly probably one I often overlook, but it is actually really useful if you want to specialize in it. Well, not even specialize, like taking all 16 of these you probably don't need, but still, it has some really good spells. Anyway, let us move on to the last school, which is Entropy. So I'm going to swap over to another character. I believe it's this one. So Entropy is... I kind of think about it as the opposite of the Creation School. Yeah, it's where you inflict debuffs on your enemy or status effects on your enemy for the most part. Really interesting school, not one I use a lot. It does have some decent spells though, so let's have a look at them. Okay, so the first spell is Weakness. The caster drains a target of energy, inflicting penalties to attack and defense, as well as reducing its movement speed unless it passes a physical resistance check. I mean, this can be useful, kind of helps your rogues and warriors out with the damage they're inflicting. And if we just cast it on someone, you've probably seen the enemies use this on you as well. There we go, and now their attacks will be doing more damage. Like I said, it is very much a debuffing school in general, and Weakness is just the first example of that. Paralyze. The caster saps target's energy, paralyzing for a time unless it passes a physical resistance check, in which case its movement speed is reduced instead. I almost always prefer Glyph of Paralysis. However, this does have one upside that Glyph of Paralysis does not do, and that is that if they resist, they still get the penalty to movement speed. Glyph of Paralysis, if they resist, then it just didn't affect them. So that is one bonus for Paralyze. Having said that, I still prefer Glyph of Paralysis in general. And there we go, we got the Paralyze off. It's still a really good spell, so certainly you can grab that if you're coming into here, and you'll see later there is a Mass Paralysis to upgrade it. But before we get to that, Miasma. This is a sustained skill. While this mode is active, the caster radiates an aura of weakness, hindering nearby enemies with penalties to attack and defense. Unless the opponents pass a physical resistance check, they also suffer a penalty to movement speed. Now this, I do like a lot more than Weakness, and that's actually because it is a sustained skill, so this is always active. Once you have it, you can do it, and then all the enemies around you will have lowered attack and defense. You don't have to just target one of them. And if they resist the first check, no problem, it's going to check again in a few seconds. So they will likely be affected by it at some point. And also, if they resist it, no problem, they still get a penalty to movement speed. I really like spells that, if they resist it, they still get some sort of debuff. Even if it's just movement speed. Still can be useful. So Miasma, I actually really like that spell. Then we come to Mass Paralysis. All hostile targets in the area are paralyzed for a short time unless they pass a physical resistance check, in which case their movement speed is reduced instead. Now you may notice the wording there, all hostile targets. So unlike the spell combination with Glyph of Paralysis and Glyph of Repulsion, this cannot inflict friendly fire. It will only affect your enemies. You do have to wind it up, but once you've done that, you can do this. Paralyze everyone in that area of effect, but you can see my dwarf character, what's his name again? Jarek. Jarek was not affected. So Mass Paralysis, really powerful spell. Actually extremely powerful. So it's an interesting skill tree in Entropy. I wouldn't bother with these first two spells. No, that's not fair. I wouldn't bother with the weakness. These other spells, really useful. Although, to be fair, once I have Mass Paralysis, I probably wouldn't need Paralyze anymore. But yeah, really interesting. Now we come to the hexes. So first, Vulnerability Hex. The target suffers a hex that inflicts penalties to cold resistance, electricity resistance, fire resistance, nature resistance, and spirit resistance. Essentially, whoever you cast this on is going to become weaker to all your other spells. Cast that on, and then my other spells will be doing increased damage against them. Affliction Hex. A contagious hex inflicts penalties to cold resistance, electricity resistance, fire resistance, nature resistance, and spirit resistance on the target and all other enemies nearby. That's essentially just an upgrade to Vulnerability Hex, which only targets one person. This is more of an AoE effect. Yep, there we go. Okay, cool. I mean, it's not like you can see much happening, but I trust the game that it is doing what the codex here says it's doing. Okay, Misdirection Hex. Now this is really frustrating when the enemy uses it on you, but you can also cast it back on them. The target suffers a frustrating hex of inaccuracy. All hits become misses, while critical hits become normal hits. Yep, so basically this means they will not be hitting you at all. What I might do for this one, I was going to reload, but the Alpha here should be a good enough target for this. Okay, Misdirection Hex please, thank you. There you go. So now he should be missing his shots. Now he hit that one because that was actually critical shot. So the critical hit did normal damage, but he should be missing the next shot. Okay, well, I don't know what's happening, but anyway. Yeah, but you can see now his attacks are not hitting me at all. And that's because of Misdirection Hex. The only way he can hit me is with a critical hit. And if he gets one of those, then it'll do normal damage instead of critical damage. Really useful spell. It kind of does nullify one strong enemy, but because it only hits one target, it's not something I'd bother with in most fights, when you're fighting just the usual weak enemies. Okay, Death Hex. The target suffers a hex of lethal bad luck. Every normal hit it suffers becomes a critical hit. Really good spell. Really helps your rogues and warriors out. Does absolutely nothing for your mage though, because mages can't get critical hits with a staff. Cast Death Hex on him and then get Jarek here to attack, and you see every hit becomes a critical hit. Really helps to take one enemy out really quickly, if you use your rogues and warriors to do it. Like I say, it doesn't help out your mage at all though, which is interesting, given that it is a spell. Right. Disorient. The caster engages in a subtle mental manipulation that disorients the target for a short time, making the target a less effective combatant by inflicting penalties to attack and defense. I mean, just inflicts penalties to attack and defense, so again helps out your rogues. There we go, enemy using Misdirection Hex there. Horror. The caster forces the target to cower in fear, unable to move unless it passes a mental resistance check. And as you can see, it's got a spell combination when combined with Sleep. Sleep is also in the skill tree, so we could probably see that effect, but we'll just cast Horror for normal now. There we go, and as you can see, he's not doing anything, he's just cowering in fear. If we cast Sleep, hostile targets in the area fall asleep unless they pass a check, although they wake when hit. Again, this is one that only affects hostile targets, not your allies, so no friendly fire here. But if you cast Horror on a sleeping target, then it will do a ton of damage and wake them up. I believe is what it does. Last one here, Waking Nightmare. Hostile targets are trapped in a Waking Nightmare unless they pass a mental resistance check. They are randomly stunned, attack other enemies, or become the caster's ally for the duration of the effect. Enemies that are already asleep cannot resist. Really interesting effect here. Let's see if we can cast it. Okay, we stunned him. As you can see, there are a bunch of effects that can happen though. And it is interesting that if I put someone to sleep first, they can't resist the Waking Nightmare effect. Okay, last skill tree here. Drain Life. Really good spell. Well, I say really good. It is a decent spell. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but it does heal you a little. I think it's the only healing spell outside of the Creation School. Although, like I say, doesn't heal you a ton. But Drain Life there, so we take a little life from the enemy, who you can see, by the way, is attacking his own enemy, his own ally, because of the Waking Nightmare. But we took a little of health from him and restored our own. Next is Death Magic. This is actually already active on this character, but while active, the caster draws a nearby entropic energy, draining residual life force from any dead enemy nearby to heal the caster. Again, another healing spell, requires dead enemies around you. Yeah, so really good late into the battle. Once you've killed quite a few enemies already, you can use this to kind of heal up a little bit. Curse of Mortality. We should know what this does because it is really a pain. The caster curses a target with the inevitability of true death. While cursed, the target cannot heal or regenerate health and takes continuous spirit damage. But you can always use this yourself. So there we go, Curse of Mortality. He can't heal himself now, which he's a spellcaster, so he might actually have heal. But Drain Life, you'll see, won't actually heal him. It'll still damage me, but it won't heal him. But he is taking constant spirit damage now. Okay, this very last one, Death Cloud. The caster summons a cloud of leeching entropic energy that deals continuous spirit damage to all who enter. Friendly fire possible. Exactly what it says, it causes damage to everyone who enters the cloud. I believe there is a spell combination with Death Cloud as well. I think it can be combined with Death Hex, maybe, to cause massive damage. But anyway, it's an interesting AoE spell. It's basically the Entropy Mage's version of, say, Inferno or Blizzard, basically. But there we go. Those are all the basic skills that a mage can get access to. There are a lot of spells here. A lot of them are, I'd say, situational. A lot of them are really good. There's very few that I would actually call useless. But they usually fall into the class of situational or very good, depending. Okay, I think here I will now go over the mage skills. Don't worry about these two trees here. These are awakening skills. It's because of the DLC I'm in that these appear. We'll go over those later in a different video. For this one, we'll just focus on the top row, which is all that a mage in the base game has access to for a general skill. So first is Arcane Bolt. Arcane Bolt, really good, just a basic low-level attack. There is still an archer there. Yep, we'll use that on him then. Arcane Bolt, there we go, did some damage. It just deals spirit damage to the enemy. Now, as you can see, I don't actually have the others, but I don't really need them to talk about them. So, Arcane Shield, the caster generates a protective sheath that helps divert incoming attacks, gaining a bonus to defense. This is a sustained mode, so you activate this and it just increases your defense slightly. Makes you a little bit tankier when you're being targeted. Not usually a spell I bother that much with. I do get it, however, just for these last two, which are really good passive spells. So, these two, unlike all of these other spells, I believe these are the only passives the mage gets, at least in the base form. There are some passives in the specializations. But at least out of the spells, these two are the only passives a mage can get. The first one's Staff Focus. Character is specialized in direct attacks using a mage staff, gaining a permanent bonus to damage from basic attacks. Just really good for every mage. Sure, you'll use your spells as often as you can, but at the end of the day, you are equipped with a staff, so you're going to be using your basic attacks sometimes. So this will always be good. Arcane Mastery. The mage has gained a keen familiarity with the arcane arts, granting a permanent bonus to spell power. We talked about spell power earlier. This is just a way to get a passive bonus to it. So also really good, just makes your other spells that much better. This one here, probably not as good as Staff Focus in my opinion. Spell power is good, but I mean your spells are good enough without it, so not needed, but it is certainly nice to have. Okay, now let's start talking about the specializations. So, as with all classes, the mage has 4. This character is a shapeshifter. The other specializations are Arcane Warrior, Spirit Healer, and Blood Mage are the 4 specializations you can have. We'll start with Shapeshifter. Now, in the base game, this is actually what Morrigan starts the game with. So if you've played around with Morrigan, then you might be familiar with Shapeshifter. Essentially, it lets me turn into, or lets the mage turn into a variety of animals. Now we'll talk about them all, but I'm actually going to start with the last one, Master Shapeshifter, and that is because this character's unlocked it, and it's a passive that basically buffs all your other forms. So I won't be able to show you the base form, just because I already have Master Shapeshifter on this character. But Master Shapeshifter essentially just changes the form that these take, and it gives them all the Overwhelm skill, essentially. Or I should say gives the first two the Overwhelm skill. So we'll have a look at that when we transform into those forms. And we'll talk about the effects with Flying Swarm when we get to that one. But just be aware that this character already has Master Shapeshifter activated. Okay, first, Spider Shape. So let's turn into a spider. Do have a little bit of a wind up, but then we become a Corrupted Spider. This is because I have Master Shapeshifter. If I wasn't Master Shapeshifter, I would have just a normal giant spider, I think it is. You can see here the skills down the bottom. So the first one just lets you turn back into a humanoid, whether you're human or elf. The second one, Poison Spit, so that just spits poison at the target. Third one is Web. You've fought spiders before, so you should know that what that does. It just immobilizes the target. Do also have Overwhelm, and that is because of Master Shapeshifter. You wouldn't have this without Master Shapeshifter, you just have the other two. But if we find someone, I'll show you what Overwhelm does. It's a very annoying spell when it's used against you. Really useful here, so it just knocks the target down and does constant damage to them. And it lasts for quite a while as well. You can see that took out half of his health. Although maybe that's because I got paralyzed. Not sure, but anyway. That is what the spider does. Okay, let's turn back. Here we go. So let's do the bear. Now, this is going to be a bear scum because of Master Shapeshifter's active. There we go. So we've got our Bearascam. Again, first one there just lets me turn back into an elf. Second one, Slam. Bear slams the target. If the attack hits, it deals critical hit and knocks the target down. Then we get Rage. The bear becomes enraged, gaining a bonus to strength and a penalty to defense for a short time. And then we get Overwhelm again. So we don't need to see Overwhelm. It does the same as it does with the spider, but Slam is just this attack here where it does a massive hit. While Rage is just a buff to myself, well, a buff and a debuff. Boosts my attack but lowers defense. So here we have Flying Swarm. It's probably the most interesting of the forms. Flying Swarm, the shapeshifter's body explodes into a swarm of stinging insects that inflict nature damage on nearby foes, with the damage increasing based on the caster's spell power and proximity. While in this form, the caster gains Divide the Storm, and any damage the shapeshifter suffers is drawn from mana instead of health, but the caster regenerates no mana. The swirling cloud of insects is immune to normal missiles, it has a very good chance of evading physical attacks, but is extremely vulnerable to fire. With Master Shapeshifter, the character gains health whenever the swarm inflicts damage. Yep, so that's what Master Shapeshifter does for it. It's a really interesting form here. These other two are kind of similar to the Rogue Ranger, but this is kind of unique to the Shapeshifter. As you can see, I'm just a swarm of stinging insects. And if we look there, Divide the Swarm. Interesting, there was actually a typo in the description here. It said Divide the Storm. It's called Divide the Swarm, which makes a lot more sense. But as we can read in the description there, the Shapeshifter directs part of the swarm to break off and engulf a targeted enemy, temporarily disorientating and stunning the opponent. The spell also weakens the swarm, bringing it closer to the brink of collapse. So yeah, and the cool thing here is you're essentially immune to normal attacks. I'm taking mana damage instead of health damage, and I don't think missiles affect me at all. But let's look at Divide the Swarm. So if I want to target the alpha over there, we'll divide the swarm. There we go. But it did do a lot of mana damage to me, but he's now also infected with the swarm, so that's really cool. It's a really cool form, and because I am a Master Shapeshifter, I'm actually gaining, or I would be if I was taking health damage, I'm gaining health back from these enemies, because it's got a drain life effect on it. But it's a really cool shape. I actually quite like the swarm shape. I wouldn't normally use the other two, but this is, you know, really interesting and really unique to the Shapeshifter. Okay, let's turn back to human. And now I'm going to swap to one of my other characters so that we can see what some of the other specializations. Okay, this character here, he actually has Shapeshift as well, but no talents in it. Spirit Healer. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with this because Wynn starts the game as a Spirit Healer, and as you've seen, I use Wynn constantly throughout my playthroughs. So first up, Group Heal. Now this was one, I think in my main playthrough, I'd kind of forgotten the spell exists. Really good to have though. I'm just going to run through here and take some damage on both my characters. Preferably without dying would be nice. Don't mass paralyze, please. Okay, fine, whatever. We've both taken damage, so now that we have, let's come in here. Group Heal. Okay, Group Heal, and there we go. It healed both my party members. Really good spell. The downside to Group Heal that I've found is that there's no good tactics for it. Because I have looked through here to see if there's something like for if several allies are damaged, and there's just not. So Group Heal is one that I haven't bothered setting tactics for, and I'll just activate it manually as I need it. It's the only downside to it, but it is a really good spell. Revival. So if one of your characters is knocked out, you can revive the fallen party member to bring them back into the battle. Really good, and I know in my main playthrough, when using this, has saved me quite a few fights. Yeah, just a really powerful, and I believe this is the only way to revive a fallen party member mid-battle. Usually you have to wait for the battle to end, and then anyone who was knocked unconscious during the fight will come to, but with this you can do it mid-fight. Really long cooldown though, so usually you only get to use it once per battle, but that makes sense given how strong the spell is. I'm not going to wait until Jarek is knocked out to show you how it works, but you surely saw it enough in my main playthrough. Next, Life Ward. Now, these two spells are not ones I really used in my main playthrough. So, Life Ward. The caster places a protective ward on an ally that automatically restores health when the ally falls too close to death. So, I can cast Life Ward on Jarek there. And then if he got to the point where he was almost knocked out, he would actually regain a bunch of health. It's actually a really good spell for a tough fight. Not one I tend to use that much though. I'd rather just heal them as they get damaged using Group Heal or the Heal spell or potions or whatever else. Cleansing Aura. While this mode is active, so this one is a sustained mode. But what does it do? So while this mode is active, waves of healing and cleansing energy emanate from the caster, restoring health to all nearby allies every few seconds and curing the injuries of allies very close to the caster. Second effect there, really interesting, cures injuries. So if you have run out of injury kits, you can actually do it with a Spirit Healer using Cleansing Aura. But what I do find is that my mana goes down really fast when I'm using Cleansing Aura. Because every time it heals, as you can see, Jarek's getting constantly healed, so it is really good, but your mana is also being drained as that happens. So it is a really good sustained skill, but you do need to keep an eye on your mana while it's happening. Because it is really easy to just run out of mana if you're not paying attention. So Spirit Healer. If I'm honest, it might be the strongest specialization in the game. Some of the others are more fun, but just Group Heal and Revival alone make this an excellent choice. And then Cleansing Aura is also a really good spell if you want to get it. But, okay, let's swap over to someone with a different specialization. Okay, so this is an Arcane Warrior. I did take the specialization on my Mage when I was doing the main playthrough, but I didn't really end up using it that much, so let's actually have a look at what these skills do. First, Combat Mage. So this is a sustain skill. We will start by just putting them down the bottom. So this first one, Combat Magic. While this mode is active, the Arcane Warrior channels magic inward, trading increased fatigue for an attack bonus and the ability to use spell power to determine combat damage. Aura of Might and Fade Shroud improve the effects. Additionally, regardless of whether the mode is active, an Arcane Warrior who has learned this spell may use the magic attribute to satisfy the strength requirement to equip higher level weapons or armor. So, now the point of an Arcane Mage is to essentially use weapons and armor. As opposed to, say, a Mage's Staff or your Mage equipment, which usually has very little armor. Now you can see I've just equipped a sword, and if we actually look at that sword, you'll notice something really interesting. You won't notice anything interesting because this is an unusual sword. Okay, it's a little hard to show right now, but I don't have any weapons that kind of show it. Because all of this stuff can be equipped regardless of your stats. But if you have the skill, then all your weapons and armor that usually have a strength requirement will now have a magic requirement instead. So your magic stat will be used instead of strength for that. And that's a passive effect of this that will be active whether or not you have combat magic active as a sustained skill. But as a sustained skill, it's actually really good as well because it lets you use spell power to determine your damage in combat. So, you know, get Arcane Mastery, get everything, get the Spell Wisp, this one here, that'll increase your spell power, and it will actually be increasing your damage of when you're using a weapon like this. Okay, Aura of Might is a passive, so the Arcane Warrior's prowess with combat magic grows, granting additional bonuses to attack, defense, and damage while in that mode. So, straight upgrade to the combat magic mode, just makes you better attack, defense, damage. Awesome. Definitely grab that if you're going to be an Arcane Warrior and you plan on actually being an Arcane Warrior, like using the skills. Definitely grab Aura of Might for sure. Shimmering Shield is another sustain skill. The Arcane Warrior is surrounded by a shimmering shield of energy that blocks most damage and grants large bonuses to armor and all resistances. When active, however, the Shimmering Shield consumes mana rapidly. So it's essentially a defensive mode. There we go. Shimmering Shield is now active. I don't think you can have it active with... Oh, you can have them both active at the same time. Awesome. But do be warned, it will consume a lot of mana once you get into combat. Lastly, Fade Shroud. The Arcane Warrior now only partly exists in the physical realm while combat magic is active. Spanning the gap between the real world and the Fade grants a bonus to mana regeneration and a chance to avoid attacks. I wouldn't say this is a must-have for an Arcane Warrior. It's nice to have. Chance to avoid attacks, awesome. And bonus to mana regeneration means you can use your other spells more often. And possibly also offsets the costs of using Shimmering Shield too, if we're honest. But yeah, so this is just the Arcane Mages. So let's use my sword, given that I'm an Arcane Warrior. But yeah, there we go. So these are an Arcane Warrior skills. To be an effective Arcane Warrior, like actually using a weapon and all that, I really think you do want to have that plan from the start so you can get talents to help you out with that, and also distribute your stats to help out with that. Okay, but that is the Arcane Warrior. Now let's swap over to one of my other characters, or I should say the character with the last specialization I want to show off. Okay, Blood Mage. So, now you'll notice, 3 of these are grayed out, there's a reason for that. So the first spell, Blood Magic, is a sustained mode. For as long as this mode is active, the Blood Mage sacrifices health to power spells instead of expending mana, but effects that heal the Blood Mage are much less effective than normal. Yeah, so this is the real cost to being a Blood Mage. If we use Blood Magic, I'm now going to be using health to be powering my spells instead of magic. So if you look there, that injured me, for example, as you can see, and also healing will be much less effective on you while this mode is active. So it really is a risky strategy, but it is the Blood Mage's entire game plan. So if we have a look, now that we're in this mode, these other 3 are able to be used. So you need to be in the Blood Magic mode before you can use any of the Blood Mage skills. Next is Blood Sacrifice. The Blood Mage sucks the life force from an ally, healing the caster but potentially killing the ally. The healing is not affected by the healing penalty of Blood Magic. So Blood Sacrifice is really how a Blood Mage can actually be used. So if we try it on the Bronto here, it did heal myself. I also got paralyzed, but that was unrelated, and injured the Bronto. If you use this enough on your allies, it can kill them. But the good thing is that at least your allies are not affected by the healing penalty of Blood Magic, so you can heal them up normally. So you kind of use these 2 in conjunction. This one lets you use health to power your spells, and then you can use your allies' health to heal yourself. Blood Wound. The blood of all hostile targets in the area boils within their veins, inflicting severe damage. Targets stand twitching, unable to move unless they pass a physical resistance check. Creatures without blood are immune. That last bit is kind of unfortunate, but at least we're fighting Darkspawn who do have blood, I believe. So let's use this. He resisted the effect, you saw there, but it would have... I actually think it's affected the Hurlock there, if we're honest. Yeah, it deals damage and kind of freezes them in place. And as you can see there, does a damage over time effect. Really good spell. Blood Control. The Blood Mage forcibly controls the target's blood, making the target an ally of the caster unless it passes a mental resistance check. If the target resists, it instead takes great damage from the manipulation of its blood. Creatures without blood are immune. Really powerful spell. Firstly, you can turn an enemy into an ally, so let's try the alpha with this. And even if they resist, they take a lot of damage from it. He is now an ally. Yep, so he's on my side now. I believe it'll wear off after a while. All the enemies are dead, which is why he's not really doing anything. But, yeah, really good spell. And if he had resisted it, mental resistance check, if he'd resisted, he would have taken a lot of damage. And there's your Blood Mage talents. And that, I believe, is the last thing I want to show you about the Mage in this video. Really interesting mixture of skills, and the biggest downside of the Mage is just how much reading you've got to do to understand what all these skills do and how they all interact with each other. Because they do have a lot of spells, unlike a warrior or a rogue who specialise in a weapon, and will probably get all the talents related to that weapon, the Mage can pick and choose what he wants to do. And he has a lot of interesting effects, from direct damage to healing to paralysis to some of the Blood Mage ones, whether you're inflicting statuses or, you know, healing yourself using your ally's blood or changing into an animal with the shapeshifter. There's a lot the Mage can do. Makes them some of the strongest characters in the game, but they are very much glass cannons. Because they don't usually take that much damage before being knocked out. Oh, there we go. It finally wore off, so he's back to being an enemy now. After blood control wore off. But anyway, there we go. That is the Mage. So I hope you found this video interesting. And yeah, hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.